Confidential. I'm here in Rome, in the British School at Rome, and I'm talking to Jane Draycott, who has just co-organised with Emma Jane Graham, a fantastic conference. Can you tell us about it?
Well, the conference was called Bodies of Evidence, Redefining Approaches to the Anatomical Votive. And what we wanted to do was to get scholars working from all around the world on all kinds of sites from all periods to come together and discuss the anatomical votive.
What is an anatomical votive?
Well, exactly. That was one of the things that we were really interested in trying to pin down, because just about any terracotta that's even remotely human-shaped, whether it's a head or a leg or an internal organ, is lumped into this category of anatomical votive. And people talk about them in religious work, they talk about them in medical works, and nobody really seems to go any further than that. And what we wanted to do was to try and really think about what is an anatomical offering, and what are they used for and why.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was a fantastic day, I know, because I was there, but maybe you could just explain a little bit about some of the paper. Do you think that you achieved this aim of getting dialogue between different sorts of work and anatomical votives?
I think so. We had speakers from the UK, from Turkey, from France and Germany. We had academics, museum curators, we had PhD students, we had papers on Rome and Gaul, on the Wellcome collection and the Louvre, and I think we managed to get a really good selection and a really good cross-section of all the different people that are working on anatomical votives, all the different things that they're doing with them. So yeah, it was a really good day. Lots of interesting conversation and dialogue.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed it. Was there anything particularly surprising that emerged from the day?
I think something that was surprising was how many people are working on specific types of anatomical votives, but coming at the same objects from such different directions, so shedding different lights on them. We had 2 papers on internal organs and viscera, for example, but they were completely different, and it meant that we got a really good appreciation of the differences, which is why we wanted to do, one of the reasons we wanted to do the conference in the first place, because these objects, they get classed as being the same thing, when actually even the types of votives that are theoretically representing the same part of the body can be very different, very interesting because of the differences.
So how does all this tie into your own work? Can you tell us a bit about what you're working on?
Well, at the moment I'm the 2011 to 12 Rome Fellow at the British School at Rome. I'm just coming to the end of my 9 months here actually, and my research project is the Gardens of Hygieia, the role of the hortus in Roman domestic medical practice. And I'm really interested in the intersection between medicine, magic and religion, and the way that healing and healing practices were part of everyday life. So anatomical offerings, I think, quite nicely, they're at the centre of medicine, magic and religion in this intersection, and they're very interesting for the ordinary person's religious beliefs and practices. And so while I was at the British School at Rome and I was working on gardens and domestic medical practice, I was also looking at questions of religion, because you frequently have the household shrine in the garden, and there's a lot of religious and magical, superstitious medical practice going on at home. And so the anatomical votives, they were, I thought, they were quite a nice side project.
I mean, the gardens that you're working on, do they survive, or are you working with texts that describe gardens?
I started with texts. I started with the agricultural writers, Cato, Varro and Columella, because they quite comprehensively talk about gardens and different types of gardens as well, mainly villa rustica and land use and specific gardens on a villa estate. But then writers like Horace and Martial and Juvenal, there are all these very interesting throwaway references to different types of gardens, gardens in cities and houses and on roofs and on terraces. So I put all of those together to start with. And then I went to Pompeii and Herculaneum and Oplontis to have a look for the remnants of ancient gardens. And what's very interesting about those sites is that there's a little bit of everything. There's a terrace garden at Herculaneum, there's possibly a greenhouse at Herculaneum, there are peristyle gardens.
A greenhouse?
Yes, exactly, a greenhouse. And we have a reference, or several references to the Emperor Tiberius having greenhouses to grow his cucumbers. And Marshall talks about a very rich man who has a collection of fruit trees in his greenhouse that survive the winter. One of the houses at Herculaneum, apparently when they were excavating it, they found what they think are the remains of a greenhouse. And today, when you go there, the garden is just open because the glass and presumably frames to support the glass aren't there anymore. But I've seen some reconstructions of what they think it might have looked like. And the reconstruction that it's not quite how we would expect a greenhouse to look. It's not all glass. It's more a case of glass panels, like windows.
So not a complete glass structure?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? I mean, I suppose that much glass would have been very expensive. But yes, I mean, this is where we run into the problem of what did an ancient garden actually look like, and if the purpose of a greenhouse is to have your exotic plants kept warm and you know, you would expect there to be more glass than just panels, you know, rather just windows to look through. So I'm not convinced by some of the reconstructions I've seen. I do like to think of it as being a bit like a Roman conservatory.
So if people wanted to go and visit, you know, the closest thing to an ancient garden, what site would you recommend them going to?
It depends how far afield you want to go. If you go to Fishbourne Palace in Sussex, for example, they've reconstructed the Villa Palace Gardens there. They've also got I think a herb garden that's more of a sort of an imaginary reconstruction. They think there would have been a herb garden, so they've actually created one, a garden that the Romans, that contains the herbs the Romans would have grown. In Italy, one of the things that's quite interesting over the last few years is that there have been these attempts to replant ancient garden sites. So if you go to Pompeii, there are various houses where they have replanted the hedges, they've got vines and olive trees, that sort of thing. And people debate how authentic these reconstructions are. Some of the gardens that were first reconstructed, I think, they weren't reconstructions, they were just plant, you know, we've got a garden space, let's put some plants in it. Whereas more recently, there has been this attempt to try and recreate them as they would have, partly as they would have been.
With the plants as well,
yeah, exactly.
That they could plausibly have had. Because that's what you're particularly interested in, isn't it? Like, is it the medicinal plants?
Yes. Well, partly medicinal, because again, what the Romans considered medicinal, it's blurry, because I want to look at what is actually being grown in the garden and how it's being used. And there is, of course, you can grow herbs and plants and fruits and vegetables and specifically gather them, chop them up, put them into tonics, for example. But there are also references to lavender in pillows to help you sleep, for example.
Like today?
Exactly, like today, yes. And things like keeping the house fragrant, because certain smells will ward off certain negative, physical feelings. So it's, what is medicine? What is it? I almost want to call it aromatherapy or that kind of thing. This idea that by using what's in the garden to alter your environment, you can actually improve your physical health.
So this research that you've been doing for the last 9 months, is it going to come out in the form of an article or a book? Where can we expect to read all this?
Well, hopefully it's going to be a book, and I've started the research and I have a plan, and I know what I want to say about Roman domestic medical practice and Roman horticultural practice, and so hopefully it will be written and released in a couple of years.
Oh, I'm really looking forward to reading about that, and thanks very much. Well, thanks for organising this brilliant conference that we're at.
Thank you for coming.
And yeah, I look forward to hearing more about your work in the future.